very entrepreneurial, hardworking, and that alone is enough to make me want to live here for the rest of my life. Put the icing on the cake, and a booming ag economy, booming oil sector, everything's booming, economy's great, and things are really good. Unfortunately, when your two main industries are very cyclical in nature, you have these ups and you have these downs. And everything's great when things are going up. Tax revenue's growing, government programs are growing. In fact, we had record spending last legislative session, record tax revenue, everything's great. Well, inevitably it's going to come down, and it has. And so North Dakota will come out of this just fine. However, the next few years are going to be challenging. We can't spend record levels every biennium anymore. We can't increase programs. We can't create all these new fancy programs. We just can't do it for a while. And so that's why we need someone reform-minded to be the next governor of North Dakota. We need someone who's been outside of the political establishment. We need someone who doesn't know or doesn't have these weird political alliances at the Capitol, or someone who isn't tied to this particular program because it was one that I passed when I was in the legislature, whatever. We need someone with a fresh perspective. But that's not enough. We need someone who not only who comes as sort of an outsider, but we need someone who has the right ideology and the experience necessary not only to win the race, but to become governor and implement a very good, free market-minded reform agenda. Rick is that man. Rick's the only guy I know who would take the works of Mises and Hayek on vacation and read them on a beach. Only guy I know. I don't even do that, and I'm crazy. So he's got the right philosophy. Like Jared said, I worked in public policy for a few years here in North Dakota. And so I got to understand what makes politicians tick here. I mean, what motivates them. And what in my work, I got to know Rick a little bit, and I noticed that he was different. He was more of an intellectual. He understood what the role of government ought to be. And when you combine that ideology with Rick's experience, I mean, he's a smart guy, he's a doctor for crying out loud, with the fact that he's created multiple very successful businesses. I mean, we're standing in one right now. He understands the challenges that small business owners face. I have several small businesses, and I have to jump over government hurdles all the time. Rick's been there. He knows what it means to face those same hurdles. So he knows what we're all facing. So when you combine the ideology with his experience and running as someone who can offer a very fresh, reform-minded perspective, he's our man. And our paths crossed in a different way at one point too. My daughter had an accident at daycare one day. She split her head open, or not her head, but she got a big cut across her forehead. And it wasn't life-threatening or anything like that, but we spent the day in the emergency room. And at one point, the doctor came in and he said, I could just stitch that up real quick, but I really think you should have a plastic surgeon take a look at it. And, just because it's in a very visible place and we don't want to have a big ugly scar there for the rest of her life. It was the day before her second birthday. And so we sat there all day, and he said, okay, the plastic surgeon on call will be here. And so he, and of course I knew Rick at the time, and he walks through the door. Hey, Rick, okay, so you're the guy, great. Well, what made me kind of wonder, well, why is he here, is the fact that it was his election day. It was the day that he was elected to the North Dakota House of Representatives. In fact, and the surgery, if I remember correctly, was in the late afternoon or early evening. He hadn't even voted yet because he was in surgery all day. And so after he stitched up my daughter, everything went great. I could barely see the faintest line across her forehead. He went right to vote, found out he had won, went to his victory party, and ever since then he's been the best legislator at the Capitol. Everybody, please give a warm welcome for Rick Becker.
Thanks everyone for coming. I have a few notes over here, but I'm going to try and not use them. The purpose of the notes was to make the 1,000 things that I would like to be able to tell you down to 100 or 2. But I'm still going to try and keep it shorter than that. On the way trying to get here, my car actually wouldn't start. The battery was dead, and so I prefer to look at that not as bad luck in the campaign, but as a sign of the perseverance that me, my campaign staff, and everyone involved with the campaign is going to show for the rest of the campaign, and we're going to keep going on to victory. So here we are. Thank you for coming. This is the campaign kickoff rally, and as such, I thought it would be appropriate to sort of give an explanation of the who, why, what, and how of this campaign. The who is me. I am Rick Becker. I'm running for North Dakota governor. I'm from Mandan. I was born and raised in Mandan, lifelong North Dakota resident. For college, I went to University of North Dakota and continued on there in medical school and continued in general surgery residency. Following that, I needed to move on for plastic surgery residency, and I went to Wayne State in Detroit. Now, when I was a resident at the University of North Dakota, I conducted a study in North Dakota regarding breast cancer and reconstruction for women. What I found in that study is that the women of North Dakota had much less access. The reconstructions were being done at a much lower incident or rate than what was seen elsewhere in the nation. So it clearly showed that there was an issue and that it needed to be corrected. So I continued to do additional training at the University of Arkansas in Little Rock for breast reconstruction and microvascular surgery. By the time I was done with all of that, I had 3 boys. I was in the process of adopting my daughter, which, by the way, in my video, apparently it's confusing for some people. The one on the way was 18 years ago. Annie and I are not expecting at this time. Because I didn't think there was any confusion, but I have heard it from at least 4 people. So that is not in the works. And at any rate, I had opportunities to establish a practice in places like Little Rock and Las Vegas and others, but really what was crucial was finding a place to establish a family. And I knew without any hesitation that North Dakota was the place, having been from here, having family here, and knowing what the virtues are of the people here. So I established my private practice in 1997, December, and I've been very fortunate. It's worked out well. I did find that I had sort of a hobby, a penchant for business, and wanted to continue on with that. Very briefly, I opened the first Medi-Spa, North Dakota Spa de Athena, in 2000. Opened a surgery center, add-on to my clinic in 2008. Got involved with commercial real estate, which, as Brett said, you're standing in one now. And then most recently with Annie, we've opened this multi-venue bar and restaurant complex, including Humpback Sally's on the first floor, Luft, and then if you haven't been there, you should consider going to the Speakeasy on second floor, which has a secret door. It's called 510.2. It's quite a treat. At any rate, these businesses, this involvement, operating, establishing these businesses gave me a vast experience. This is experience that they didn't teach me in college or med school. It's certainly not residency. So over these years, I've learned by experience, by the old College of Hard Knocks, how to deal with budgets, how to do forecasts, which were called pro formas, how to work with people, how to handle employees. It's this type of experience, and we call it executive experience. This is what's needed to carry on into the governor's mansion. I eventually became much more interested in politics. I did secure a seat on the Bismarck Planning and Zoning Commission for a short term. And then, as luck would have it, I was redistricted in 2012, and there was an open seat. So opportunity came knocking. It didn't quite fit my timeline that I had planned, but that's the way life works. So I ran 4 and 1, being a representative in the North Dakota State House in 2012, re-elected in 2014. Just a little bit about my time in the House. To me, time is the most precious commodity. And I wasn't going to waste it messing around, trying to be the good guy, playing by all the rules. I wanted to go in and I wanted to make stuff happen. and that's what I did. I started what's called the Bastiat Caucus, and Brett told you that I'm kind of geeky in the area of politics, and it's true, I do. Every vacation is a fantastic opportunity. I just went on a fishing trip with my dad, and I read 2 great books, both of which were printed in the 60s and dealt with the Republicans and conservatism in the aftermath of the Goldwater loss. At any rate, Bastiat was a French philosopher and economist, and he had a fantastic way of explaining to the people the benefits of a small, decentralized, limited government that had a respect for the rights of the people. So we formed this caucus because I sort of felt alone in the legislature. There wasn't discussion between the conservatives, and when I say the conservatives, I mean a much smaller group than you might think. But we did get together about 3 or 4 times, and we had good discussions, and this led me to be more confident. Plus, I had learned the ins and outs of being in the legislature. So in 2015, we continued with the Bastiat Caucus. We met weekly. We had 12 to 24 people show up. That's significant. I mean, I want a lot more. We all want a lot more, but that is a significant improvement, and it leads for more of a foundation to keep building on, to form a coalition of true conservatives that are going to move the state in the proper direction. In addition to that, I had several bills that I sponsored or co-sponsored. Many of them are listed on the website. It's kind of just a listing, but really I focused on several things: civil liberties, education reform, tax reform, just to name a few. I guess I'm focusing on what I'm going to be talking about later, but there are several. I was really active. Again, if we're there to do a job, you do it. You get off your butt and you just do it and you keep working, and that's what I want to take to the governor's office. So in my 20s, essentially, I lost a decade there or more in my training. There's no time for anything. But in my 30s, when I came back here, I had my 4 kids and was quite busy. Despite that, I had for the first time some time to myself. And I read. I hadn't read for enjoyment for many, many years. But what I did find myself lured to and intrigued with is this political philosophy, economics, political history. And I don't know why, but it did. It just caught my attention. So I learned more. I continued reading, and I began to really understand why these conservative principles, this respect for liberty is so important. Why having a small, decentralized government that limits its functions only to what's necessary actually increases prosperity for all, increases societal wealth, and increases standard of living. I also was able to take this experience of business and realize how much government tends to be an imposition and slow things down. And I realized all of this came together for me to want to try and do something to make things better, to make it better for my kids and my kids' kids, because I have a grandson now. And so that's the basis for this general reason why I'm running. Much like the state legislature, this governor office is probably at least a good 4 years sooner than I would have liked it. But like I said before, we can plan as much as we want and things fall into place the way they are, and it's a matter of taking the opportunity or letting it go by. And I'm taking the opportunity because this is truly the proper time to do it, because we need someone to stand up and do it. So that's who. And don't worry, all the rest aren't as long. Let's go with why. And essentially I already addressed it. We are at a crossroads in North Dakota. We have very gradually become further and further from the core principles of limited spending, of acknowledging that if we leave the money in our taxpayers' pockets, they can do more with it. The economy will thrive more than it ever could with those same dollars being funneled through government agencies and being distributed through favoritism. The time is ripe at this moment because although we got away with some of that general lack of consistency, the decreased revenues we're seeing now won't allow for that. We could bemoan the fact that we weren't maintaining our principles before, but now we have to get back to those principles. I'm on the Government Finance Committee during the interim, and it's important to realize things are not as rosy as they seem. 6 months from now, we'll all be talking, hopefully you'll say, hey, yeah, Becker was right. They're not as rosy, that's too bad. But the revenues, as they're projected, are going to be less. Yet we've got a government that's bloated. Spending has skyrocketed. So the question is, what are you going to do? There's less revenues. There's a ton of spending that's occurred. You've got two choices, decrease spending or increase revenues. Increase revenues means increasing fees and taxes. It also means spending the legacy fund, which has been building up over the years. So are we going to just waste that away? Are we going to increase taxes so we don't have to make choices to cut? That's what I'm concerned about. From what I've seen, that's a very real possibility. We need someone who's going to stand up and say no to that, this bloated government can be decreased substantially. There are an endless number of places we can start cutting and maintain the standard of living we want because we're going to increase the prosperity because of free market policies. So that's the why. As far as the what, I had to think of all the who, why, what, when, where. As far as the what, there, as you might guess, a conservative philosophy encompasses a lot, essentially everything. But if we were to look at some of the main topics, we're looking at taxes, education, and spending. As far as taxes go, what I would like to do as your governor is to propose and work with the state legislature to decrease the overall income tax burden to the citizens. Now, our income taxes are not that high, partially because of the last 2 or 3 legislative sessions, we decreased them. However, every dollar that the government takes that isn't truly necessary is a dollar not well spent. So we need to make sure that our tax rates stay low and are simplified. Having a low tax burden is clearly an engine for private entities to become more innovative and more productive, and that benefits everyone. With regard to property tax, we are in a quagmire. And part of what got us there has been how we handled it, and we're trying to do good things, and we're not making tough choices. Nevertheless, it is where we're at. Now, what I'd like to see is true reform. I would like to see the valuations as they continue to increase, which is a means for the government or for local subs to take in more tax dollars but not call it a raise, a tax hike, when in essence it is. We want to eliminate that. We want to eliminate other aspects of the stealth aspect and make it very transparent. And we also want to look at opportunities where the subs will need to tax less as well. For instance, school construction projects. You know, we can bond those. We can use other funds for that instead of increasing taxes, property taxes. When it comes to education, K-12, we need to take local control. We need more control for the state, for the teachers, and for the parents of the students. And I'm talking a lot about Common Core. Common Core was in the news a lot, and there's good reason. Now, the Common Core standards, and I won't go way into depth on this, but I was a very, very strong opponent to Common Core. Common Core is a set of standards that dictates essentially what the curriculum is going to be. These standards are developed by intellectuals in California, a small group of intellectuals. And that's dictated to us. Now, we might like the standards, we might not like the standards, but the real question is, what if we want to change them? What if we think that standards that are tailored to our children is the best option? What if we think that we can actually make our standards more rigorous? Well, we don't have a choice. Being in this whole Common Core thing, we can't change the standards. We've agreed to not change them by more than 15%, however you might measure that. So the real key is just taking control back. I'm not even saying the Common Core standards are bad. I am. But that's irrelevant. The key is we need control. Let our school districts decide what's proper for the children. Let parent involvement in the school districts decide what's proper for our children. When it comes to higher ed, many areas. Here's the problem with higher ed. They're not held accountable. We need the legislature and the governor to hold higher ed accountable, and I'm talking about the presidents, the chancellor, and the state board. If we can't hold them accountable, if we can't live up to our obligations as a legislature and as the governor, we are remiss in our duties. It's our responsibility, and it's been somewhat overlooked, I believe. We need to hit that. A A couple other things with higher ed. The number of, this is thanks to Dustin Gulrell, I read, the number of non-instructional faculty on the payroll in the higher ed system has grown so disproportionately to the increase in students or to the increase in instructional faculty. The payrolls are just bloated with unneeded personnel because the money's there. We have to say no to that. Brick and mortar, it's like there's a race on all the campuses. Build, 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 build. That's all fine, but we have to take into account that this is a new world, new technology. There are more online courses going all the time. I believe it's about 40% of students take at least part of their coursework online. If you're taking it online, you're not putting your butt in a seat in a classroom, which means that probably we don't need more classrooms. We need to look at that closely. And that brings me to the third aspect, butts in the seats. North Dakota is aggressively campaigning to get students from out of state. I was just in Minneapolis 3 weeks ago, downtown, billboard on top of a building. Hey, you students, come to UND. It's great. Well, it's one thing if they're coming to UND because of the rigor and the reputation of our academic programs. Aerospace would probably be a good example of that. The issue, though, is that higher ed is just trying to get the numbers up, up, up. These students are coming in as reciprocity students. Now, being a reciprocity student is a fine idea, I suppose, but the problem is that the number of North Dakota students that are getting reciprocity in other states is a tiny fraction of the number of students from other states that are getting reciprocity here. Now, what does that mean? We subsidize, taxpayers, North Dakota parents, subsidize all of the students in our university system. That means that we are paying for our own kids' college. We're paying for all of the North Dakota kids that are going to college, but we're also paying for thousands and thousands of Minnesota students and others to go to college. I'm glad they're coming to UND. I hope that some of them stay. I'm sure they contribute a lot. I don't want to pay for them. That's not my responsibility, and it's not your responsibility. So that's higher ed and education. We can move on to spending real quickly. Here's some stuff I looked up last night in the state government publications. In the last 10 years, since 2005, our state population, according to my calculations, has really grown significantly, 16%. I mean, that's big for a state that was losing its population, for a state that its previous high was, someone can tell me, probably 1930, I think, something like that. So suddenly we've got this new opportunity of people coming into the state, new business, etc. At the same time that we've had that substantial increase of 16% in the population, we've also had an increase per capita income, roughly 50%. There's all sorts of different numbers depending on websites, but roughly 50%. That's astounding. 50% increase in 10 years of our incomes. Now, unfortunately, it's tempered a little bit because that includes the oil field workers who have really high salaries. If you take those out, then the rest of us, the salaries didn't increase really 50%, but let's just say 50%. If you compare and contrast these two metrics with government spending, state government spending, during the same period of time, I would expect, well, I guess government spending probably should have increased somewhere 16, 50%, something like that. It didn't. It increased over 200%. Now, why is that? Some of it's infrastructure, that's what people point to, but infrastructure had a big allocation last session, not so much before that, and it really doesn't address the growth in the rate of spending. It's substantial. It has to stop. It has to stop now because we don't have the revenues to support it, and it has to stop because it's just morally wrong. The legislature and the governor need to realize it's not state money. There's no such thing as state money. It's your money. It's the people of North Dakota's money, and if we respected it as much as we respected our own money, we wouldn't be spending it like that. So that's the what. Now the last thing is the how. It's important that you become involved. The key is to have someone in the governor's office, if not me, someone else, but someone else who is consistently principled. That's the key. And that's a little bit redundant because if you're principled, you should be consistent. But actually, having been in state government, I have to tell you, it's the key. You have to find people that, number one, understand what they believe in, and they have the principles, and number two, are consistent. They don't just talk about their principles when it's convenient. They actually live by them, no matter whether it's convenient or not. So in going to that end, two things. Like all campaigns, we can use donations. You can talk to my staff. You can go online and donate. But more importantly than that, the number one thing far and away is becoming involved. There's a delegate process. I need you to become delegates. I need your friends and family to become delegates. And again, on the website, there are links we can show you how. It's kind of a two-step process. I'm simplifying it. But you go to your local district meeting, January, February, to become a delegate. You go to Fargo the weekend of April 2nd, 3rd, and you'll cast your vote for me as governor. And then you'll have an opportunity to cast your vote for DPI and auditor and several others, U.S. Congress and U.S. Senate. But here's the thing that's a lot of people don't really know or grasp, and that is at this convention there are going to be about 2,000 people. The state has roughly, say, 740,000, right? There's going to be roughly 2,000 people at this state convention. They are going to effectively be choosing the next governor for the state of North Dakota for the entire state and the other 738,000 people. That's a lot of power, it's a lot of influence, and it's a time to become involved. If I can get you all and the people you know and the people across the state to become involved, the grassroots people, to overcome what's really an obstacle, because the people that normally go to the conventions, I work with them, I like them, but some of them are a little bit more entrenched and are not as crazy as me. And so that's what we have to break, is we have to surmount the number of people that only look inside the box. And we have to fill the convention hall with people that look outside the box. If we do that, we will have an opportunity to have a more prosperous North Dakota for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. What I'd like to do is just, again, kind of underscore the importance of the delegate process. Winning this is actually pretty easy. All you got to do is bring about 5 friends with you. And I'm available. If any of you need any information whatsoever on this process, contact me. Now, what we'd like to do is just for a few minutes, we'd like to just open up for a couple of questions, if anybody has any questions, and then we'll go back to our fun and our mingling here. Does anybody have any questions? Maybe you covered everything so thoroughly.
Yes, sir. Well, philosophically, it would be a road usage fee, but that's a different society. Well, philosophically, I'm not suggesting that the counties put up tolls. I think that, well, first off, the Fed money comes in. It's very substantial. It's part of what I'm doing right now with a bill that I got passed, and I'm on the committee. We're studying the federal regulations and the costs of implementing regulations in order to get the free federal money. So the federal funding is going to be part of it. One of the things that I think is most intriguing is instead of dumping out $1 billion for roads all over in western North Dakota and other areas, why not bond it with our own slush funds, if you want to call them, with the legacy fund, with the SIF, bond it instead of just paying it outright. Now, sometimes a person may think, well, isn't it better to pay cash? But the way I view it is if we paid this tremendous amount of money to build roads, right? That's our new baseline. So that in the future we can say, well, we're not increasing. So you get this sort of this feel of how much you're spending. But if you were to bond it out and pay for it over the life of the road, pay for it over 30 years or what have you, what you have is a much lower and consistent cost ascribed to the various citizens, and you're not going to have these huge peaks and then trying to figure out what you do, because once you start, sorry for the volume, once you start, government has shown you just keep going. So the whole point is try and not spend as much, and we could bond it out. Yep, and that's actually two allocations or appropriations. One is for continued maintenance all throughout the state, and then the other one is for major, and that's the $1 billion I'm talking about, the major structural things, building new roads, 4 lanes instead of 2, bridges, things like that. But there is, and it's actually huge. We're coming up upon a time where the Department of Transportation, because I was on Transportation Committee as well, is forecasting how much they're going to be requesting for the next many successive bienniums. It's huge. It's huge. I sound like Donald Trump there. It's really huge. We're going to do great things. Yes, sir. First, welcome to a land of like-minded individuals. That's good. I love the idea. I think it's fantastic. And another thing that you mentioned, aside from just a good idea, is this aspect of fear-mongering. When anyone challenges the status quo, Prop 13 challenged the status quo significantly. When anyone challenges the status quo, we saw it with Measure 2 in our state for abolishing property tax. We saw it, oh gosh, I'm blanking, but Common Core. Tremendous fear-mongering because of the resistance and the fear of change. People are in the system. They don't want it changed. And so we have to be aware of mass campaigns that instill fear and doubt when it's not necessary. But I agree with the idea behind Prop 13. Yes, sir. It's going to be a pen that's full of ink. It's going to be this thick. Absolutely. That's why I'm there. Well, I'm a proponent of the Second Amendment, much like the First, Third, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, Seventh, Eighth, Ninth, and Tenth. The 10th Amendment is actually my pet amendment, but very, very supportive in doing anything. I don't want to say supportive of the Second Amendment because I think most people ought to say they're supportive of our amendments, but I'm actively supportive of the Second Amendment as evidenced by various bills that I've sponsored and co-sponsored. That is clearly a right that is being attempted to be eroded and to some degree successfully eroded. And we hear about gun-free zones. A gun-free zone is a zone where only criminals have guns. And I can speak to the choir, but actively, aggressively supporting the Second Amendment is yes. 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 Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thanks, Val. I'm looking more into that. From what I'm aware so far, and I could be wrong, I believe that by executive order I can get us out of Smarter Balanced. Now, Smarter Balanced is the standardized test that is completely aligned with Common Core, which is the reason why Common Core actually dictates, the standards actually dictates the curriculum, because you have to teach to the test. There are rewards and penalties for the teachers if they don't do well on the test. So if we get out of Smarter Balance, that starts to have a domino effect as I view it. Secondly, with regard to Common Core itself, I believe that would take legislative action. Now, as Common Core being one of my significant platform pieces, if I'm elected governor, that says something. That says people want to get rid of it. A very anti-Common Core governor being elected will have potentially a bit more influence or workability with the legislature to come up with an alternative to Common Core. And so I think that that will happen. Being elected on that platform will give the governor a significant amount of capital, and that capital should be spent on things like Common Core. All right, so let's wrap it up. They're going to have buffet food, so please stick around for the food. They're holding a debate party where you can just watch the debate. It'll be on audio here with the big debate, so you can hear Donald Trump, see if I sounded like him at all. And I think that is it. Thank you once again. I really appreciate you guys coming out.